Hello my lovelies! This video is just going to be a really quick and easy tutorial for how to make a patchwork journal or notebook. They've got a soft cover and I just really like the way that these turned out. They were super easy to make and I just really like them. I made these for my children. So this superhero one is for my son who loves making comics. And then I also made an Alice in Wonderland one for my daughter. And she saw the fabric as I was making this and she just thought it was so pretty. So I hope she likes it when she gets home from school today. I added these little tie closures and bound the pages in, and I'm just going to show you the whole process of how I did it now. It was really easy. I promise you, anybody can have a go at this. So you can see here, there's not that many pages, but you could make these bigger or smaller depending on your preference. And this is just a really basic, quick and easy tutorial. You can embellish yours however you like. I left the pages blank, but obviously you could decorate them beforehand if you want to. So I started off with these fabric quartz, and I found these in Aldi actually. So this was a Marvel pack, which I just thought my son would really like. It's just got all the different superheroes on. And then this is the Alice in Wonderland pack, and this is my favourite. I just think it's absolutely beautiful. So there's the white rabbit and some Cheshire cats, some different playing card symbols, mushrooms and different artwork, and then the Alice in Wonderland one as well. And I just think they are so gorgeous. All you're going to need to get started is your different pieces of fabric. You can use scraps, whatever you have, and a piece of plain white card. I then used a bit of a cereal box to make a template. I just cut out a square, and this is what you're going to use to make your patchwork pieces the same size. So I lay my template on top of my fabric, and you could paperclip this. It probably would be a much better idea to paperclip it on and make sure it is secure and perfect, but I don't tend to be like that with my journals. I tend to just kind of wing it and see what happens. So I just held the square on top and cut it carefully, and this was the first square for my daughter's Alice in Wonderland journal. I then continued across the fabric, trying to make sure I got different parts of the print so that each patch was slightly different, and I think I did about 6 patches per fabric type, but obviously depending on how big your journal is, you may need more or you may need less. So here I'm just cutting those out, and you can see once I'd done them all, I just had a little pile of different patchwork squares. And you can see below I also did this for the Marvel ones. I was making 2 at the same time, so that's why there's sort of both going on here. I then got some ordinary PVA glue and my piece of card, and then just an old brush that I used for glue, and I squirted a thin layer of glue across my card. You want to keep the glue as thin as you can because it's just going to help to stop things wrinkling. So I spread that out quite well and just make sure it's as thin a layer as I can. I probably should put newspaper down when I'm doing this on the kitchen table, but I just make sure I clean up after myself, and it always turns out okay. So you can see that I'm just spreading that as thin as I can, and now it's really simple. You literally just stick your patches down however you think they look good. So I try to make sure that there's not 2 of the exact same patch next to each other. I try and balance out the colours as best I can, but honestly I just go off what I think looks nice. You might prefer them a different way, and that is absolutely fine. Yeah, it's really simple. You could lay these out before you stick them down so you have an idea if you prefer to have things a little bit more organised, but as I've already said, I'm a little bit haphazard when it comes to my crafting, and I just like to make it up as I go along. With this one, I did actually overlap the edges a little bit because I thought I might fold them over to make it a bit neater, but I ended up changing my mind about that later, which is something I do quite a lot when I'm making my journals. So you can see here, I'm just trying to balance it out. It probably would have been better if I'd had a few different patterns of material, but this is what we're working with, and yeah, it turned out okay, I think. Also, just be careful, when I cut my square template out, it wasn't exactly square, which turned out to be a bit of a problem because some of the pieces I must have turned it around and they didn't lay quite right. So just always be wary of that. Either make it a perfect square or make sure if it is slightly longer on one side and it's a rectangle, that you always keep it the same way up so you don't end up having pieces of fabric that don't fit properly, if that makes sense. As I go down, I just add more glue to the bits that I'm about to stick on. I find that if I do it all at once, it starts to dry out, so this works better for me. And then I'm just filling in the bottom. Because I had such a big overlap on this side, I cut some of those bits off and just used them to fill at the bottom so I wasn't wasting anything. And this is the completed design. I really like the way it looked, and once I'd done that, I just trimmed around the edges so that it was nice and neat. Like I say, I was going to fold these over so that it would be a little bit neater, but actually I just trimmed it and it looked fine. I think it looks brilliant as it is. So you can either trim it or you can fold it. This was the one I did for my son, and instead of overlapping the fabric, I did this slightly differently. I trimmed down the card after I'd finished sticking the pieces. This worked absolutely fine as well. It's just preference. This is easier if you want it to be so you don't have any half squares or half patches, but the other way worked fine too. So I just thought I'd show you both so you can see the difference. Then I took these into my little crafting corner and I got my sewing machine out, and I'm just going to sew lines in my zigzag stitch along every line of the patchwork, if that makes sense. So you can see here, I'm just going to do one at a time and make a little zigzag along each patch. I think it really helps to make it look, I don't know, a little bit more like quilted. I have no idea, but I just thought it just added that little extra something. So I do this along all of the pieces of patchwork and I don't go around the edge yet. So you can see here, this is what my son's looks like. I think it turned out really, really well, and I know he's going to love this. Once I'd done that, I went back into the kitchen. I craft all over the place. I don't stick to one room. I don't have a set space. I have my little corner, but it's not very big. So I do tend to kind of go all over the house, and bless him, my husband probably gets frustrated with all my stuff everywhere. But anyway, I then got some of the leftover fabric and I used this to back the inside cover. Now I had all these random threads that were kind of sticking out, and I just used the brush to pull them in and stick them in to neaten it up a little bit. I could have tied them all off and trimmed them, but honestly, I couldn't be bothered. So this is what we ended up doing. And I'm just spreading the glue over again as thinly as I can. Then I got my fabric. I didn't cut it down to size beforehand. I literally just lined up the corner and the edge, and then I line up the bottom edge as well and flatten it down, because this way I can cut around it afterwards, and it was easier to me than cutting it all out beforehand, if that makes sense. I'm terrible at measuring, and I just thought this would work nicely. Now on the Alice in Wonderland one, because it's a pale print, you can see the threads and the sewing marks underneath. I don't mind that. I think it looks all right, but you might just want to be wary and use a darker, heavier fabric if that's something that's going to bother you. Once I'd done that, I flipped it over and just trimmed around the edge, added a little bit more glue where it started to come away, and I just trimmed all the way around the edge so that it was the perfect size to cover the inside cover. And that's it. That is the cover of your book. So simple, so quick. I did these in maybe an hour or so, so it really is a quick option if you want to make your own book but you don't want something that's time consuming. Once I'd done that, I went back to my sewing machine and just sewed around the outside edge to secure that inside cover, and also to add that final border around my book. And that's it. That was the covers completed. I really love the way they turned out. I'm really happy with them. I folded them over slightly, but I didn't do a harsh fold, if that makes any sense at all. So I just kind of gently molded them into the shape I wanted for a book cover. Then this morning I dyed some paper with my daughter, so I just got a tray of water and I put in a couple of drops of acrylic paint. I dyed some pink and some blue and she helped and it was really fun, and I really love the way these turned out. They're like sort of crinkly and I actually don't mind the spots of paint. They're a little bit darker. I love the fact that my daughter helped to do this and I just thought it was a really, really fun activity to do together. So these pieces of paper are now going to make the pages for my book, and I'm just going to fold them in half. So you get 2 pages out of each piece of paper, if that makes sense. So I'm folding it in half and then I'm just gauging how big I want it to be against the cover. Again, you could measure this, but as we've established, I am not a measurer. I'm not exact when I'm crafting. For me, it takes the enjoyment out. I like to just sort of measure with my heart. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Usually it does, but then I don't mind things to look a little bit rough and ready. So it depends. If you are a perfectionist, I would definitely measure. So I continued folding all the pieces of paper and I used that initial page as my template to make them all the same size. You can make yours different sizes if you want to. You could use different types of paper, different weights of paper. It's entirely up to you. But I just ended up with some blue pages, some pink pages and some white pages to match the colours on the cover of the book. Once you've got these, I sorted them into piles so that I could then alternate the colours going through the pages of the book. So I took my first sheet and then I laid my next set of pages inside and the next one inside that. You can see better than I can explain it. I know that I'm not the best at these voiceovers, but I try. So you just keep adding those pages inside until you've got as many pages as you like. I think I could have added even more pages, but these are for my kids, so I thought this was plenty. And that's the contents of your book right there. I just popped that inside the cover again to check that it fit and nothing hung out over the cover, which it did, which was great. And now you want to find the middle of this is called a signature. Your group of pages is called a signature. So you just want to find the middle of that and clip your pages together so they don't move around whilst you're binding them. Then get your cover again, and I was just pressed down in the middle of the spine so that I knew where my first hole for binding was going to go. And then I used this, I don't know what you call them, it's like a poking tool to poke a hole in the centre of the spine. Well, let's be honest, it's not the centre, it's somewhere in the middle-ish. So I poked that hole first, and then you want to do a hole on the bottom as well, in line with the middle one. And you also want to do a hole in the top. So you've got 3 holes in total. This is where you're going to sew your signature in, and you just want to make sure that they are nicely lined up so your pages lie nice and flat and straight. Then I got my pages again and just measured out where the holes should be. So you need holes at the top that match the top hole on your cover, holes in the middle that match the middle, and holes on the bottom that match the bottom. You could make yourself a template and do this so that it was absolutely perfect, but I didn't. And I think we've established that that's just not my style. I eyeball it and it works. Then I poked a hole all the way through all of the pages. This is why you need your clips to keep them nicely lined up so that you can keep them all together in the same place and your holes line up whilst you're binding. But you can see here the 3 holes that match the 3 holes on the spine of my book. Then I got some waxed thread. You can use whatever you want. You can use twine, you can use string, you could use cotton thread. It's entirely up to you. And I got a needle and started by going out of the centre hole of my pages and out of the centre hole of my book cover. So you can see here, you go from the inside out, and you just want to make sure that you leave a little tail on the inside so that it doesn't pull all the way through. Then I went in through this is the top of the book, but I've got it upside down. You go in through the top hole, and again, you go through the cover and then make sure it goes through all of your pages. Pull that all the way through. And make sure you don't lose the little tail from the middle whilst you're doing it. And then we're going to go back out the middle hole. So you poke your needle back out through there and pull the thread through. And then here I like to just tighten it all up. So I like to pull on the string and just make sure that it's really tight. This is going to make sure that your pages don't wobble about, and I just think it's little things like them being really secure that makes it look a lot smarter. Next, you're going to go back in through the top or the bottom hole, whichever one you haven't done yet, and just pull everything tight. Check that there's no thread that's got caught on either side of your pages. Check that it's nice and tight on the back, and all we're going to do is then tie the two ends of the thread together. I like to do this so it sits nicely in the center, but honestly it can sit wherever you prefer it to. A lot of this journaling stuff is personal preference. I'm showing you how I do it, but I'm sure you've got your own incredible ideas that would make something even better and even more to your tastes. So I do a double knot there, tie it as tight as I can, and then I just trim the ends off to make it nice and neat. And that's it. You could stop here if you wanted to. Now the pages are in, you can remove your clips. And yeah, you've got yourself a book. That is it. That you could stop here if you didn't want to add the closure, but I just thought that the closure would be that like nice finishing touch. So I went to the back page of my book. I'm not doing that yet. What am I doing? There we go. I've got my ribbon. I found this piece of ribbon that I thought would match nicely with the prints on the fabric, and I opened my book cover and I slotted, there we go, that's what I did, I couldn't remember, sorry. I slotted the thread in between the cover and the signature of pages. So you can see here I'm just pulling that through, and it's just going to lie across the inside cover. Then I pierced a hole on one side in the center, and this is where your ribbon's going to come out of to secure it and to make sure that it actually includes the cover when you tie everything together. So I pulled that through. I'm waiting actually for an eyelet punch to arrive with some eyelets, and obviously that would look much neater, but I don't have it, so for now I'm just going to show you how I do it without. But yeah, I can't wait for my little eyelet punch to come so that this is a lot easier and a lot neater. Once you've done it on one side, you're just going to do the same on the other side. I just pushed in the, what do you even call that, like stabby tool? I have no idea. You can tell I'm an amateur at this, but hey. Yeah, so you want to make that hole again, pull the ribbon through so it's on the outside of the cover, and there you go, there's your tie. You can then tie it up and your cover and all your pages will be nice and secure inside. This is optional, as I say, you don't have to do this. I just thought it was a nice finishing touch on the book, and I know that my daughter will really enjoy having the little bow on there. And that is it. We are done. So you can see I did my son's earlier. I had a little practice before I filmed my daughter's, and I love the way they turned out. I can't wait to see them writing and drawing pictures and whatever they choose to do in these books. And I love the fact that it's something that we've made from scratch. I think there's something so special about that. Harry loves making his own books, and I know he's going to really appreciate this little present. Let me know what sort of theme you would do yours on. Is there anything you do differently? Thank you so much for watching. Bye!